Right, yeah, well, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. Uh, I got lumbered with giving a presentation that I actually put together a few years ago and then really struggled to find, but I managed to find it in the end. This is one I gave to a Birmingham Open Spaces Forum a few years back, and it was about the nature of Christmas. And it just covers some of uh, the things that we would normally see on Christmas cards, the traditions around Christmas, the Christmas food, relating back really, I suppose, to the natural environment. So if most of us think about Christmas, and we're sending Christmas cards, we'll quite often see things like robins on cards. And legend has it that the robin's redbreast is a direct link to Christianity. One fable suggests that when the baby Jesus was in his manger, in the stable, a fire which had been lit to keep him warm started to blaze up very strongly. And a brown robin, noticing that Mary had been distracted by the innkeeper's wife, placed himself between the fire and the face of baby Jesus. The robin fluffed out its feathers to protect the baby, but in doing so, its breast was scorched by the fire. This redness has been passed on to future generations of robins, as we see there. Another story suggests that the robin pulled the thorns from the crown of Christ while he was on the cross, and that it was Christ's blood that created the robin's redbreast. And the robin was one of three birds which have red plumage in their foliage, red in their plumage, and have an association with resurrection. So the other two being swallow and the goldfinch, which are often seen on cards as well. Long known as the robin redbreast, our familiar robin gave its name to the first postman, who wore red jackets and became known as robins. Some suggested this is the reason why robins appear on Christmas cards, but there's a link with Christmas which predates the Victorian postman. In Babes in the Wood, we have two children who died from cold, and the passage states, "No burial this pretty pair from any man receives, till Robin Redbreast piously covers them with leaves." So the image of a dead bird in the snow is similar to the popular Babes in the Wood motif of children who are in their mortal sleep in the forest. And may have likewise been a call for empathy for the less fortunate. However, it wasn't necessarily such a time flies symbol. Hunter Oatman Stanford at Collectors Weekly noted that the birds are often robins and wrens, and that killing a wren or a robin was once good luck ritual performed in late December. So receiving a card with a little prone bird, feet curled in rigor mortis, could be meant to wish nothing more than good cheer on the new year. It's quite nice, isn't it, really? And we've got a few examples of cards there. So we've got a picture top one with the robins on, and then two Victorian Christmas cards. One obviously with the little prone robin on there, and another weird one with a frog dancing with a stag beetle, and what looks like some sort of grasshopper playing a tambourine. Most weird. So obviously our affection with the robin was cemented in 1960 when it was voted our national bird. So robins and wrens are often linked in other mythology. The robin and the wren, God's cock and hen, but the wren's lineage is much more ancient than the robin's. Wrens were druidic birds of prophecy and have always been protected by superstition of dire consequences to those who harm one. However, there's also contradictory folklore as well. So one of the oldest folk rituals, once widespread in Britain and still surviving in Ireland and parts of Europe, was the St. Stephen's Day wren hunt on the 26th of December. Youths armed with sticks known as libbets beat hedgerows until a wren was caught and killed. This was hung from the top of an elaborately decorated pole and paraded to every house in the locality. A feather would be plucked and given to each householder as protection against witches. We've got a few pictures there of the St. Stephen's Day wren hunts there. The origins of this primitive custom, though, are obscure. A most widely held belief is that a wren alerted the guards when St. Stephen was attempting to escape imprisonment. St. Stephen was the very first Christian martyr, and in the same year that Christ was crucified, and claimed to have a vision of Jesus in heaven standing at the right hand of God. To Stephen's enemies, this was blasphemy, and he was forced into hiding, but this hiding place was given away by the song of a little wren. And St. Stephen was publicly stoned to death. So if we think about this wren's song, I mean, for the size of the bird, it has a very, very loud song full of notes. And so, yeah, you can imagine that as its Latin name, troglodytes literally means cave dweller. It could well be associated with the hiding place in amongst the rocks and crevices. However, the wren cult appears to have been brought to Britain by traders during the Bronze Age and to have its ancestry in Saturnalia, ancient Rome's most important fertility festival. During the week-long orgy, starting on the 17th of December, the role of master and slave was reversed, moral restrictions removed, and the rules of etiquette ignored. The wren was the king of birds in Greek mythology, and killing one at this time of year represented the end of the old season and the start of the new. So the holly and the ivy is well, obviously we associate those quite strongly with Christmas and this at this time of year. It's a traditional British Christmas carol, and its carol refers to the holly bears a blossom as white as a lily flower, bears a berry as red as any blood, it bears a prickle as sharp as any thorn, and the bears a bark as bitter as any gall. So if we take those in turn, we can associate those with the white as a lily flower being Mary's purity, the red as any blood as being the blood of Jesus, the sharp as the thorn associates with the crown of thorns, and the bitter as any gall. So that's one that perhaps people might not pick up on straight away, but this could be a reference to the drink offered to Christ as he hung on the cross. St. Mark in his gospel states that the sour wine mixed with gall, or myrrh as we would know it now, was believed to have narcotic effects. Perhaps sour wine and myrrh were given to a crucified person to intoxicate them in an attempt to diminish their suffering.
Yeah.
Although it is closely associated with Christmas, holly was linked to the winter traditions before Christianity. Druids considered it a sacred plant and often wore holly crowns on their heads. We also have decked the halls with boughs of holly as well as a carol. Pagans used branches to decorate their homes during the winter solstice, and it made them think of spring to come. However, it's also considered unlucky to bring holly into the house before Christmas Eve, Derek. See, you got holly on your head.
No, you're talking of your beliefs. Mine go back a lot further.
Yeah. So in pagan times, it was thought to be a male plant and the ivy a female plant. And some say its inclusion in this carol refers to old fertility myths. So we've already mentioned the holly there. So, but what about the ivy? And we'll just come on to that next. So many legends and myths are associated with the plant, which was widely used in wreaths and wreaths created for the celebrations of the winter solstice. It was associated with the Celtic goddess who kept life going through the harsh months of winter, and holly was her god. The prickly and rigid holly symbolized men, while the gentle, elegant ivy represented women. The Celts always used these plants together because they saw them as a symbol of resurrection and eternity. In Greek mythology, the climber plant was associated with fidelity. Newlyweds were given wreaths by the priest to ensure that an everlasting marriage, because the plant was also associated with fertility and good luck, as we mentioned. And the Romans were a bit more bon vivant. They therefore associated the plant with Bacchus, the god of wine, who wore a crown of ivy in order to prevent intoxication. So it's something I may well give a try this year if I'm not going out anywhere else. In Cornwall, though, ivy gave rise to the romantic but sad legend. The beautiful Iseult and the knight Tristan were so much in love that Iseult died of grief when Tristan was killed. However, the king at the time was also in love with Iseult. He became jealous of Tristan's hold on the love of Iseult, even in death. He therefore ordered for the young lovers' graves to be placed far apart from each other. However, ivy as a plant started to grow on each grave. The two plants eventually met and got intertwined in a love knot. Wagner found inspiration in the legend of Tristan and Iseult's everlasting love in the creation of the opera Tristan and Isolde. And there we have Tristan and Iseult lying together. So mistletoe, we can't forget that at all. The golden bough. It's a hemiparasitic plant which grows amongst the branches of trees and shrubs. And its botanical name, Viscum album, literally means sticky white, after its very sticky berries. And one of the birds that's most associated, I suppose, with the spread of mistletoe will be the mistle thrush, or throstle, if you want to come from around by the West Brom. Druid priests held the plant sacred and used it in their winter celebrations 200 years before the birth of Christ. They believed it could perform miracles, and it held the soul of the host tree. On the 6th night of the moon, they would cut it from sacred oak trees with a golden sickle, ensuring that it did not touch the ground. It was revered since it remained green year long, even through cold, harsh winters. Despite the fact it's not rooted in soil, it was also seen as a symbol of fertility and used as a medicinal cure for various ills. So also known as all heal, it was used in folklore to treat a variety of ailments. And currently, mistletoe is being investigated for its anti-cancer properties and its benefits as a booster of immune systems. So you never know, sometimes there's always a bit more to some of these ancient myths and legends around plants. The custom of kissing under the mistletoe may have sprung, though, from the Norse mythology and the story of Frigg, Norse goddess of love and fertility, patron of marriage and wife of Odin. When Frigg's son, Baldur, dreams of his impending death, she extracts an oath from all living things in creation to do no harm to her beloved son. But Frigg fails to ask this promise of the young mistletoe plant, and Baldur is killed by an enemy's arrow made of mistletoe. In one version of the legend, to ease her grief, Frigg proclaims mistletoe the symbol of love, so it may cause no more harm. In a happier telling of the story, though, Frigg weeps over the body of her son Baldur, and her tear drops upon the mistletoe arrow. Her tears drop on the mistletoe arrow. They are transformed into small white berries. Baldur is miraculously brought back to life, and Frigg vows that anyone standing beneath mistletoe will come to no harm, but instead receive a token of love. So therefore, a kiss. But the name mistletoe comes from two Anglo-Saxon words, mizzle, which means dung, and tan, which means twig or stick. So you could translate mistletoe as poo on a stick. So not quite the romantic association that we might normally have with it. Something that's come to be more familiar in our homes, certainly over the past decades, and you see in all the shops and a lot on cards now as well, is the poinsettia. So poinsettia is a euphorbia. It's related to our spurges and is indigenous to Central and South America. The Aztecs considered it a symbol of purity, yet also used it for the production of a red dye. The first Christians of Mexico started to use the plant as Christmas decoration during the 16th century. Mexicans called it Noche Buena, good or beautiful night. A Mexican legend has it that a young girl initiated the tradition using the poinsettia as a Christmas flower. An angel indeed inspired her, as she was lamenting that she could not afford a present for the celebration of the Nativity of Jesus. The angel gave her the idea of collecting the branches of a red bush to place in front of the altar. The bush's star-shaped flowers reminded her of the Star of Bethlehem and their bright red colour of Jesus' blood. However, the common name that we all know today comes from Joel Roberts Poinsett, the first United States diplomat sent to Mexico. He left his name to the plant, which he introduced into his country in the early 19th century. Moving away from the plant kingdom, though, we're moving on to some animals this time. So we've got Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen here. So belief in a benign deity riding the winter skies with Christmas animals, dispensing reward or punishment, stems from pagan worship of the god Odin. As ever, Christianity adopted the idea and in the 4th century introduced St. Nicholas, a saint renowned for his generosity to children and the poor. The contemporary conception of St. Nicholas in the form of a jolly fat Santa Claus in a sleigh drawn by reindeer has been accredited to Clement Clark Moore, the professor of Oriental Studies at Columbia University in New York, who in 1822 wrote the poem. Anybody any ideas out there? Sure. Yeah, you're on mute, Fontaine.
The Night Before Christmas.
It was The Night Before Christmas, yeah. And that was based around the Christmas folklore of Northern European immigrants in New York and his knowledge of the reindeer cults in Lapland and Siberia. Artists always portrayed Santa's reindeer with full sets of antlers, and the question of what sex Moore intended them to be is often asked. Bulls lose their antlers after the rut in October, so they could all be female cows. However, as they shed after they calve in spring. But oxen, which are castrated males, which the Lapps use as draft animals to pull sleds, do not shed until March.
Yes.
Different cultures across Europe, though, created their own interpretations of a mystical bringer of gifts to good children at Christmas. These manifestations came at night, flying through the air with Christmas animals, either on horseback or in a carriage drawn by goats or dogs. Nordic Sami tribesmen had a tradition of gathering the hallucinogenic fly agaric toadstool and feeding it to their reindeer. Reindeer's digestive system removed any poisons, leaving hallucinogens intact in urine. Drinking the urine induced a similar effect to LSD, and Stone Sami indeed imagined, among other things, that reindeer could fly. We've got Tangrisnir, Old Norse for teeth bearer and snarler, and Tangenjustir, which is Old Norse for teeth grinder. These are the two goats who pulled the god Thor's chariot in Norse mythology. In stories, Thor often cooks the goats. Their flesh provides sustenance for the god. And after, Thor resurrects them with his hammer, Mjolnir, and they are brought back to life the next day. And that's part of the reason why we see Yulebocker, the Yule goat again linked to Thor. But this is the last sheaf of grain bundled in the harvest. It was credited with magical properties as a spirit of the harvest and saved for the Yule celebrations. So if you go up to IKEA, that's one of the main things that you'll find there, a little Yulebocker, same shape as that one there. We can't forget about some of the animals, though, that have made our festive fare over the centuries. Wild boar was once widespread in the UK. Boars were an emblem of war and destruction, divine figures on standards, coins, and altars, the quarry of heroes, transport of the gods, a significant fertility symbol, and the most powerful of the Yule sacrifices. A decorated boar's head carried into the dining room with much pomp and ceremony was the highlight of Christmas banquets throughout the Middle Ages. One of the earliest carols, produced by Wynkyn de Worde in 1521, is the Song of the Boar's Head. The ritual of serving the boar's head on Christmas Day continued until the religious festivals of Whitsun, Easter and Christmas were banned by Parliament during the Puritan purges of Cromwell's Commonwealth. The custom survives, though, with the annual Boar's Head Gaudy Feast at Queen's College, Oxford. But for most of us, the last echo of our pagan boar cult is the tradition of buying a ham at Christmas. Following on from boar, beef and goose were popular Christmas fare until these were replaced by turkey in the mid-18th century, when George II developed a passion for eating the bird, sectioning off an area of Richmond Park specifically for rearing them. William Strickland, a gentleman adventurer who sailed with Sebastian Cabot to South America in 1526, is considered to be the first person to introduce turkeys to Britain. Strickland made a fortune from several voyages to the New World and bought estates at Boynton and Wintringham in 1542. He was granted arms in 1550 and took as his crest a turkey cock in his prime proper, so literally adorning the church at Boynton with his armorial. So normally we would see eagles being a symbol of power, and there are frequent references to them in the Bible. The eagle was the beast of Revelations assigned to St. John the Apostle, which is why the lecterns in virtually every church in Britain is carved in that shape. The exception, though, is St. Andrew's Church at Boynton in Yorkshire, where the lectern is carved in the shape of a turkey cock, with the Bible supported on outstretched tail feathers. As we've seen, evergreen plants have played an important part in winter celebrations, and no one more so in recent times than the Christmas tree. Real tree or artificial in millions of homes worldwide, the Christmas tree is the tradition that owes its popularity in part to Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Germany is credited with starting the Christmas tree tradition as we now know in their homes in 16th century, when devout Christians brought decorated trees into their houses. Some built Christmas pyramids of wood and decorated them with evergreens and candles if wood was scarce. It is widely held belief that Martin Luther, the 16th century Protestant reformer, was the first person to add lit candles to the tree. Walking home one winter evening, composing a sermon, he was awed by the brilliance of stars twinkling amidst evergreens. So to recapture the scene for his family, he erected the tree in the main room and wired its branches with lighted candles. And so now we see this familiar Christmas scene that in fact incorporates the traditions and beliefs of many different cultures and faiths from across the world. The fire, the twinkling lights, the candles, and also are also central to most cultures and a way in which to lighten the darkness that winter brings. All of these traditions and their inspiration from nature. And there we go. That brings me to an end. So thank you and Merry Christmas to one and all. I'll say it now before I forget.
Very much, Simon. That's great. A round of applause. Thank you very much, Simon.